Welcome to cooking. Today we're gonna make something a little bit different maybe than when you've had before. We're doing brownies, but not just any old brownie, of course. This is the Nutrition Kitchen. We are doing chocolate beanie brownies, none other than black beans themselves. So after you've washed your hands, what do we always do? We're gonna read through all the ingredients to make sure we've got everything, and then we're gonna read through the directions, make sure we know what we're doing, and then we'll start in. So we are gonna cook with some black beans today, and I do have the can open. Beans are rinsed, all of those bubbles are gone. That's the carbohydrate that causes the gas, and we want them gone as much as we can. We also have applesauce. Now you can get a big thing of applesauce. We know that this is a half of a cup, so it's a nice little addition if you need to use that, or we're just using a quarter cup today, so just half of that amount. We have got some kind of an oil, not a strong flavored oil, because we don't want an olive oil that's a pure extra virgin olive oil to have that flavor in our brownies. But we could use olive oil if that's all you have, because we're only cooking it up to 350, and olive oil is okay to a temperature to that temperature, so that would be fine too. I got a couple eggs, vanilla, some white sugar. If you wanted to substitute in some honey or maple syrup, go for it. You would just have to decrease the liquid because that would be more liquidy than the white sugar. We are using whole wheat flour in our brownies today, so if you only have white, go for it, but no, whole wheat is more brown. And what is the brown? It's the fiber. What does the fiber do? Keep our gut healthy. So we're going to use the whole wheat flour today. We've got cocoa powder, baking powder, salt, and chocolate chips. We have everything. Let's look at our directions. So we always prep our pan and turn our oven on. So the oven's warming up to 350. We've got an 8 by 8 inch pan here. If you've got something smaller, maybe you only have 2 loaf pans, that's fine. Something around that size, maybe yours is circular. If it's larger and circular, totally fine. It'll just be a thinner brownie, so then you'll have to cook it less of a time. So we're going to use parchment paper just because a glass pan continues to hold its heat after you pull it out of the oven for quite a long time. And these brownies do a lot better when they're just like any other brownies, when they are done but not overdone. There's a fine line. So with that glass pan, it's really good to have that parchment paper just so you can pull the brownies right out so that they will stop cooking. If they stay in the glass pan, they'll just continue to cook. So we've got that. It is a little bit tricky with parchment paper to pour into that. You might need an extra set of hands if you'd like, but that works great. So what we're going to do is we're going to blend up the black beans with a little bit of the liquid. So we're going to use the eggs, the oil, and the applesauce. We're going to get that down smooth. If you don't mind some chunky brownies, then you don't even have to puree it. If you only have a potato smasher, that works fine too, whatever you've got. And then we're going to, because this is a baking thing, we've got our 2 bowls, right? In this case, we've got our blender cup and then our other bowl. And we're going to combine all of our dry ingredients. I do like to sift the cocoa. If yours has clumps, it might be a good idea to sift it. So if you're doing this and you only will have one sifter, maybe sift your cocoa before you rinse your black beans with that same sifter, or you'll have to dry your sifter or the cocoa will all stick and it's a big mess. So do your cocoa first and then you can drain your black beans. And then we're going to just add the 2 together. We're going to add in the chocolate chips and just stir until combined. Remember, in baking, we don't like to over stir because then that is going to make it tough because the gluten in the flour, it just, as you whip it up, it just gets tougher and tougher. And if you've seen that in bread before that's been over kneaded, it doesn't rise really well and it's more chewy than it is fluffy. And then we're going to put that in the middle of the oven on that middle rack and cook it for about a half an hour. So there we have it. Let's get started. So we need 1.5 cups of black beans. We're going to pour it into here. Now, normally this is our liquid measuring cup. With black beans, it's not a perfect line because of the beans. So I thought that would be okay to use this liquid measuring cup. We've got a cup and a half. So just so you know, this was a 540 ml container. There's still about a quarter a cup or half a cup in the bottom. So if you're making these, add these to maybe your salad after, or maybe you can have lunch with a bean burrito with cheese and salsa. I don't know, do as you please. Just have a plan for that so they don't get stuck in the back of your fridge. Because now we've opened this tin can and it's been exposed to air, and air oxidizes tin and makes the taste come out of the tin. We never want to just put the lid on like that and throw it in the fridge or put a cover on it. We always want to transfer this to another container so that you don't have that tin taste coming out of the outside of the tin, and you'll have a good safe food when you go to eat it. All right, so we've got a quarter of a cup of applesauce. So we're just going to use, so this is baking, so you do have to be kind of specific when you're measuring things. Make sure you have the right amount of teaspoon versus tablespoon. And again, I'm going to make a mess. I'm going to make that flat there. Awesome. And of course, we always have our trusty wet towel here to wipe up any messes. And it is really good to clean as you go, because then you're not setting things in it and then getting messes everywhere you go. All right, 3 tablespoons of oil. So what we always like to do is to measure things into another container and then dump them in. If we were just to do this over top, if you're a good baker, a good cook, you could do that. But sometimes we get too much, it overflows, and then we don't know how much we have in there. So I like to measure out my ingredients and then dump it in my bowl or my container. Perfect. And I like spatulas because all of the work you did to get a perfect amount in there, you can now get that out. And again, we're going to use the same bowl and we're going to crack our eggs into it. Remember, we don't crack on a surface like that that's thin and a little bit sharp. We always crack on a flat surface. One crack, put our 2 thumbs in, pull them apart, and drop the egg in. And cracking it into another container allows for any shells that might be in the bottom to get taken out before you put it into your other dish. And there we go. We can look for shells. We are okay. We're going to pour all those eggs right in there. So you might only have, because we're going to use this immersion blender, but you might only have a blend, like either a blender or a hand blender, and that's fine as well. So we're going to add our 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and then we're going to blend this up. If you don't have vanilla, you can leave it right out. It's only a flavor enhancer, and look at that, there was only 2 teaspoons left. So you can definitely leave that one out. All right, so we are going to blend this up. Now this blender, if you have one of these, the only thing you have to watch is that your liquid is over top of these holes, because if it's not, your liquid's gonna squirt everywhere. So our goal is just to mix this up so that the beans are smooth. And with that amount of liquid in there with the beans, it makes it pretty easy. And there we have it. We are all mixed up. I'm just going to put that in there. Now what I do like about this blender is that you can take the bottom off. There we go. And then we can leave that plugged in. Perfect. So there is our wet ingredients right there. we haven't added the sugar yet. I'm going to leave that out so that we can remember to do that. In this recipe, you can likely just add it to the dry ingredients. Usually in other cookies or muffins, you whip the butter or the oil with the sugar to get it light and fluffy. But in this recipe, it's totally different because the beans are there. And beans make things moist. They also replace some of the flour. So beans are really going to change the texture, the consistency of this recipe. But it's very delightful, very tasty. All right, I'm going to do my cocoa first so that I can get rid of this sieve. So we've got a half of a cup of cocoa powder. Again, cocoa powder is just chocolate out of the cocoa bean, but the fat's been taken out. So if you like hot chocolate, there's recipes online where all you do is you take this cocoa powder, you add some sugar, a little bit of hot water, and then that's your syrup. And then all you do when you go to make hot chocolate is you just take that syrup, you add some milk to it, and you got your own fresh hot chocolate. So there you go. So using this sieve, it's those little bits that you're wanting to just break up, because biting into a piece of brownie with some cocoa is not very tasty. So there we go. We have got all of our cocoa nice and light and fluffy. Next we have 3/4 cup of whole wheat flour. So remember again, we spoon it in so that we're not packing it. We want it light and fluffy. Now this isn't a great container. Hopefully you have a better container. I always like to mound it, correct? And then we just scrape it off, always using the flat side of the knife. And remember, if you don't have whole wheat flour, you can use that white flour. But the whole wheat flour, I don't know if you can see that in there, you can see a lot more brown flecks, all that fiber in there. So that's a wonderful thing to have in dessert. We got beans for fiber and whole wheat flour for fiber. So you're eating healthy even at dessert time. Excellent. So we have our flour, our cocoa powder. Let's add some baking powder. Now you can substitute out the baking powder for baking soda, and you can go online and find the substitutes for that. A half of a teaspoon. Now this can get a little clumpy too. If your baking powder is clumpy, you might want to use your sifter as well. And again, I have a very poorly pouring salt shaker, a half a teaspoon of salt. And there we go. And now all we do, and what I really like about these dry ingredients with the cocoa is when you're mixing it, you can really tell when you're done mixing it, because if you look on the bottom, it's not straight cocoa, and if you look at the top, your flour is no longer white. It's a really fun way to bring kids in to help you in the kitchen, because they're going to be really watching your color change here. It's a really good combination there when you're doing the flour and the cocoa. So let's not forget our sugar. We'll add it in right here. And it's 3/4 cup to 1 cup. So there is a half of a cup. And there's about 3/4 cup. Oh, sorry, a quarter of that. So we got about 3/4 cup of sugar. Stir that up again. All right, number 4 says So normally we're in baking ingredient recipes, we pour the powder into the bowl with the wet ingredients because it's a lot easier, but this time this is a lot smaller, we won't be able to fit it. So we're just going to scrape it into there, right into the middle. But make sure you're using your spatula to scrape it all out. You don't want to leave any of your goodness left in your blender cup. But if you did just use a blender, then you can just pour your dry ingredients straight into your wet ingredient bowl. So it says to add your chocolate chips. We should do that as well. And I'm just using the cocoa measuring cup. Now I do like, these aren't mini, but I like to add mini chocolate chips when I'm doing brownies or muffins or cookies because I find the mini chocolate chips go farther and they don't clump together like some of the bigger ones, and they don't fall down to the bottom. They're a little bit lighter. So you can see as I'm stirring, this is stirring, but I want to fold because I want the recipe ingredients from the bottom of the bowl to come to the top of the bowl to get mixed in. Remember, we don't want to over mix it. See that? We have that clump of dry flour and cocoa right in there, so we want to make sure that we're getting the things off the bottom to come to the top. So we're scraping the top, scraping the bottom, putting it on the top until we're just combined. There's another chunk of flour. What you can always do as well, if you have a glass dish, is pick it up and look on the bottom just to make sure everything is good. All right, so now we are going to transfer it to our container. So what I like to do is I've pre-measured this and I've pushed it down like this so that I know everything fits, and then the parchment paper covers all the edges. But I know as soon as I let go, it's going to pop up. So what I like to do is I just like to put a little bit in to begin with, right in the center. And there where I've pushed it down, it's going to remember its positioning really well. And we scrape it out the best that we can. Scraping our spatula against our bowl as well. Get all of that goodness off our spatula after it did so much work. And there we go. I know we always talk about how good cinnamon smells. This doesn't have cinnamon in it, but it smells really good as well. So then you just want to move this around to all your edges. There you have it. Black bean brownies. So when we put it in the oven, remember, we open our oven door, count 3 seconds, and then we put it into the middle rack, and I'll meet you back here in 30 minutes. All right, let's check and see if this is done. Opening the door, count to 3, and then we're gonna pull it out. 1, 2, 3. So with cakes, you like to test in the middle of the cake, but brownies we like to test an inch away from the edge because the middle we want moist. You can see that came out nice and clean, so that brownie is done. So now what we want to do, so the parchment paper is not hot, what we want to do is just lift this out and put it right on a cooling rack so that it doesn't continue to cook, so that this center is still moist and delicious. So there you have it, black bean brownies.